Okay, guys. So we made it to I'm on page 7 now, and this is the part where Romeo sees Juliet for the first time. Um, it's a pretty neat scene, um, and I'm really pretty fascinated by it. So this should be, I think, interesting to look at. So when Romeo first sees her, um, he catches a glimpse of her. He says, "What lady is that which doth enrich the hand of yonder knight? I know not, sir. Oh, she doth teach the torches to burn bright. It seems she hangs upon the cheek of night as a rich jewel in an Ethiop's ear, as beauty too rich for use, for earth too dear. She shows a snowy dove trooping with crows, as yonder lady o'er her fellow shows. The measure done, I'll watch her place of stand, and touching hers make blessed my rude hand. Did my heart love till now? Forswear its sight, for ne'er I saw true beauty till this night." Do you see how it's a poem? He's just talking about how great she is, but it rhymes. Um, right? What lady's hand doth rich the hand of yonder knight? I know not, sir. Oh, she doth teach the torches to burn bright. Night, ear, deer, crows, shows, stand, hand, sight, night, and then it's over. So it's like a little mini poem. Again, he doesn't know he's talking poetry. He's just talking. Shakespeare gives it to us as poetry. The poetry is not. The characters can't tell that everything rhymes because nobody would be able to think of exactly that number of syllables to rhyme just immediately. It's not like if anybody sees somebody really beautiful and suddenly they are able to compose a poem where every 10 syllables there's a word that rhymes with the word at the end of the next 10 syllables. But Shakespeare puts that in for you. That's why it's really important when you write your papers to talk about author and audience. You're not just talking about what the characters do to each other. Talk about what Shakespeare does to you, the audience. And one of the things Shakespeare does to me, the audience, here is he communicates Romeo's feelings by putting them into poetry, actual rhymed, rhythmic verse. Um, Romeo can't hear it, but I can. Why? Shakespeare wants me to hear it so that I recognize this is love. It's like the power of love is communicated by like the power of the poetry. Uh, so that Romeo really breaks out with poetry when he sees her. But it's when they talk to each other for the first time that is really one of the best parts of the whole play. And so I'm going to show you that scene next because it's really one of my very, very favorites. I'm still on page 7. Um, these are Romeo's first words to her when he sees her. "If I profane my unworthiest hand, this holy shrine, the gentle sin is this: my 2 lips, blushing pilgrims, ready stand to smooth that rough touch with a tender kiss." Now, this is a little hard to follow. It's a little tricky because it's poetry. And so it's a little more complex than you would get. And I realize Shakespeare characters are hard to understand, but this bit from Romeo is a little tougher than normal because first of all, remember Romeo when he had all those paradoxes, that oh heavy lightness, feather of leads, bright smoke. He expresses himself in a kind of complicated poetry because fundamentally he's like a poet. You might want to think about the movie has Leonardo DiCaprio writing poetry in a notebook on the beach. It's pretty cute, but I think it's important for thinking about what Romeo is. He's kind of a poet, and he has the soul of a poet. Um, and so he speaks in poetry. So let's take a look at his first 4 lines here again. He kisses her hand, or he touches her hand. And he says, "If I profane with my unworthiest hand this holy shrine." See, that's a metaphor. He's comparing her hand to like a holy temple. And that if he touches it, maybe it's blasphemy. But he jokes, "The gentle sin is this: my lips, 2 blushing pilgrims, ready stand to smooth that rough touch with a tender kiss." Well, it's a metaphor where he takes her hand and he says, "I hope I'm not offending you by taking your hand, because maybe touching your hand is like touching a statue of Jesus in church. Maybe this is blasphemy." But he says, "My 2 lips are like 2 pilgrims who've come to church, and they will remove the sin by kissing your hand." Um, it's an overly complicated bit of poetry where he compares Juliet's hand to a holy temple, and he compares his lips to pilgrims who have come to that temple, and that if he's given her any sin, he'll take it away by kissing her hand. So it's a nice little bit of poetry, and of course it rhymes, right? Hand, this, stand, kiss. Now, what's fascinating is Juliet's response. She remember he said his lips were like pilgrims, and he said her hand was like a holy shrine. So she calls him pilgrim. Like a pilgrim is a person who's going to church, a religious person. "Good pilgrim, you do wrong your hand too much, with mannerly devotion shows in this." right? He says you're being sort of too fancy to talk about my hand as if it's something special. For saints have hands that pilgrims' hands do touch, and palm to palm is holy palmer's kiss. So what she's saying here simply is that, right, you don't need to talk about your hands. It's not sinful to touch another person's hand. Saints have hands, right, and pilgrims' hands do touch. So it's very common, she says. Lots of people go and if they see a statue of a saint, they'll touch it, and saints touch people, so that's okay. But then she tells them, and this is cute, palm to palm is holy palmer's kiss. A palmer is a religious person. They're called palmers because they put their palms together, and I can't do it because I only have one free hand, but they put their hands together like this to pray. What Juliet is doing is cute. Romeo says to her, your hand is like a holy shrine, and I am like a pilgrim come to that shrine. And if I am doing wrong by touching your hand, let me remove it with a kiss. And she picks up his terms and uses them, which is very fun and playful, because he said I'm like a pilgrim. So she says, okay, pilgrim, since you've come to this holy temple, she says, first of all, it's perfectly fine to touch hands, right? Pilgrims touch saints' hands all the time. It's fine. But she says, palm to palm is holy palmer's kiss, meaning this, a palm touching a palm, is like a kiss. So she's sort of teasing him a little bit, getting him to kind of like, why are you talking about kissing? If you just said you were a pilgrim, so you don't need to kiss me. Touching hands is enough because people who pray put their hands together to get to God. So if you want to get to me, you can just do it with hands. You don't need to be talking about kissing. It's cute because he put a metaphor in his words, and she hears that metaphor and says, okay, I'm going to extend the metaphor. I'm going to keep this metaphor going. Also notice her lines rhyme. Much, this, touch, kiss. So what they're doing together is they're creating a poem. And it's actually a particular kind of poem. It's a sonnet. It's going to have 14 lines when it's all done. It ends here. But their first meeting is they're creating a poem together. He writes the first 4 lines. They rhyme. They have a metaphor. She writes the next 4 lines. They also rhyme, and she uses the same metaphor. Then they start writing a little faster. Romeo says, have not saints lips and holy palmers too? Meaning, like, we don't just have to touch hands. Like, saints have lips. Maybe kissing is okay. She says, I, pilgrim, lips they must use in prayer, not for kissing. Romeo says, oh, dear saint, let lips do what hands do. They pray, grant thou, lest faith turn to despair. So she says, listen, yes. So Romeo says, well, wait a minute. Why do we have to just touch palms and touch hands? Why can't we kiss? Saints have lips. And she says, yes, they have lips for prayers. And he says, kissing you would be like a prayer. And he says, please grant me my prayer, O beautiful goddess. Otherwise, I'll fall into despair. I'll be depressed if I can't kiss you. She says, saints do not move, though grant for prayer's sake. Meaning saints, because you think about the saints as being like statues. They don't actually move, so she's not going to move to kiss him. He says, then move not while my prayer's effect I take. And he kisses her. Thus from my lips, by thine, my sin is purged. Because she's so holy, kissing her takes away all of his sins. Because again, in this metaphor they're using, she's like it's like going to church to confess your sins, but you use your lips to confess your sins. Well, he used his lips, but he did it to kiss her. And then she continues to talk to him in the same kind of joke. Then have my lips the sin that they have took. Right? Well, wait a minute. If you're sinful and you gave me sin with your kiss, then I'm sinful now. And he says, sin from my lips, of trespass sweetly urged, give me my sin again. So she basically says, well, wait a minute. If you got rid of your sin by kissing me, now I'm sinful. And he says, oh, well, if you're sinful, let me take the sin out of your lips by kissing you one more time. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. It's a little silly, I know, but I really like it because they're composing a 14-line poem together. And it's one of my favorite metaphors for the power of falling in love, is they essentially become co-creators of they become co-creators of a single poem. And let me read that poem to you. If I profane with my unworthiest hand this holy shrine, the gentle sin is this. My lips, 2 blushing pilgrims, ready stand to smooth that rough touch with a tender kiss. Good pilgrim, you do wrong your hand too much with mannerly devotion shows in this. For saints have hands that pilgrims' hands do touch, and palm to palm is holy palmer's kiss. Have not saints lips? Holy palmers too? Ay, pilgrim, lips that they must use in prayer. O then, dear saint, let lips do what hands do. They pray. Grant thou, lest face turn to despair. Saints do not move, though grant for prayer's sake. Well then move not, while my prayer's effect I take. Thus from my lips by thine my sin is purged. Then have my lips the sin that they have took. Sin from my lips, O trespass sweetly urged. Give me my sin again. So they begin to be, the poetry is a metaphor for kind of their love. Okay, I got through that. Okay, cool.